My father always said that I lacked enthusiasm and didn't have the ability to achieve success. But I proved him wrong. In a short time, I rose to prominence in the national financial community. Recently, I was recognized as one of the youngest founders on Wall Street. When I drove my Ferrari to the family barbecue, the whole place went silent. I am Joshua Langford, 23 years old, and I built a financial technology company in Charleston, South Carolina, from scratch. In my hometown, prosperity has always been linked to sunburned necks and calloused hands. My father, Nathan, ran a landscaping business for 30 years, measuring a person's worth by their physical labor. The disappointment in his eyes when I decided to pursue finance instead of continuing the family business was deeper than any shovel could dig. For the past 3 years, I have tirelessly developed an algorithm capable of outperforming large companies in predicting market trends. I spent countless nights, weekends, and holidays hunched over my laptop, while my friends were out enjoying life. My father would occasionally pass by my room, sigh, and tell me that boys who only played with computers would never amount to anything. Each time I heard that, I decided to work 1 more hour to prove him wrong. At the family dinner last month, I accidentally overheard my father telling my uncle that he would return to lawn mowing for the summer. In the desert, that kid can't sell water. His words struck me like a dagger to the heart, but I didn't react. I finished my meal, helped clean up, then returned home to complete the most important deal of my life. As I grew up, I watched my father expand his landscaping business from a single truck to a fleet of 20 vehicles. From the age of 12, I worked for him every summer, responsible for mowing lawns, planting trees, and hauling mulch under the harsh Carolina sun. My father taught me the importance of hard work, but eventually, he confused that hard work with overwork. He hardly acknowledged my acceptance into the business program at the University of South Carolina. Instead of celebrating, he simply handed me a $20 bill and said, "College boys think they're invincible until they face the real world." That was how he sent me off. My mother, on the other hand, was different. She whispered to me, "Do something that makes you happy," and secretly handed me $500 she had saved from her teaching salary. She didn't say this when my father was around. In my second year of college, I developed an algorithm that stunned one of my professors. He told me that it could change the way ordinary people invest. I decided to take a semester off to focus on developing it into something that could succeed. My mother cried when I called her to explain my decision. My father couldn't stand it and cut the call. I lived in a small apartment with 2 friends, surviving on ramen for the next 2 years. I was rejected by one investor after another. They told me I was too young, lacking experience. I printed out each rejection email and taped it to the wall. Not to motivate myself, but as a reminder of those who didn't believe in me. Thomas Blake, my freshman roommate, was the only one who always stood behind me, supporting me throughout the tough years. He was the only one who never doubted my ability, always believing in my future. Whenever I got distracted in my work, he would remind me of the importance of staying focused. "Remember us, the poor ones, when you're rich," he would say, and I always knew that this wasn't just a sarcastic remark, but a form of encouragement. Then there was my father, whom I had always respected, but he never understood the work I was doing. He would frequently question me, looking at me like a child still searching for answers to an unsolved problem. During Thanksgiving, he would introduce me to his clients, saying, "This is my son, who is still in the process of finding answers." That statement, though not ill-intentioned, always made me feel like I was at a crossroads without a clear direction. His advice was for me to apply for a management position at his company during the holiday break when my computer was malfunctioning. Every time I tried to explain my work, he would never listen, instead switching the topic to trivial things like a neighbor's well-maintained garden. In that way, what I was building seemed to never be a subject he wanted to discuss. But then, on my 23rd birthday, an email from Blackwater Capital changed everything. One of the largest hedge funds on the East Coast, they wanted to buy the rights to my technology for $14 million. I stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of cold coffee, reading that email over and over again 17 times to be exact. This was undoubtedly a turning point in my life. Thomas was the first person I contacted. He screamed so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear because I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I then called my mother. She cried again, but this time, the tears were of happiness. I didn't call my father. 3 days later, I signed the contract with Blackwater in New York. The directors of the fund invited me to dinner at a fancy restaurant with no price list. Patricia Donovan, the CEO, raised her glass in a toast, speaking of a bright future for finance, and everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, but in my head, only one voice rang out. It was my father's. That poor kid. You'll never have the mindset to succeed. That night, I received a message from Evan, the only cousin in my family who had ever believed in my project. I just read the article in the Wall Street Journal. Josh, it's truly shocking. You're famous now. I opened my MacBook, and my face appeared on the financial news websites. A 23-year-old college dropout signs an 8-figure deal with a Wall Street giant. The article mentioned my age 3 times, as if that was the most important thing about me. I closed the laptop and looked out the window, where New York glowed beneath the lights. I no longer felt anger or hurt. I only felt an odd sense of clarity. Everything around me seemed to become still, like the mist slowly lifting from the riverbank in my hometown. I knew exactly what I had to do next. The following day, I walked into a Ferrari dealership. I wore a t-shirt and jeans, looking nothing like a luxury car buyer. The sales representative barely acknowledged me until I mentioned the price range I was considering. 2 hours later, I drove off in a red Ferrari Roma. Not because I truly wanted that car, but because I needed a clear message that could not be misunderstood. Before leaving Charleston, I didn't contact my company. I knew my father's annual Memorial Day barbecue would be taking place. He would invite all his clients, employees, and extended family to celebrate his success. I arrived precisely at 2 p.m., when everyone was gathering in the backyard, and I, standing there, brought with me my own message. When I entered the party, my father's large garden was already packed with guests. Old friends, business partners in the landscaping industry, and his employees were all gathered to celebrate another successful year. My father, with his silver hair and old khaki suit, stood at the center of the crowd, laughing and chatting with everyone, sharing stories about his garden work and the new crops he had planted that season. His stories always carried a sense of pride, as if nothing mattered more than the gardening work he had dedicated his life to. I didn't participate in the conversation, not because I didn't want to, but because I felt like I was standing outside the lives of these people. All of them, from my father's employees to his clients, seemed to have no understanding of what I was doing. They looked at me as if I were a stranger in the family, someone who had abandoned the path my father had taken, a path he always called hard work is the key to success. I didn't say anything. I walked into the backyard, where everyone was gathering to eat and talk. My father immediately noticed me, his eyes cutting through the crowd and landing on me. He smiled with a self-satisfied look, but I could see the tension in his gaze. Surely, he was wondering why I had returned after so many years of leaving the family business. But he didn't say anything, just a small smile. Then he turned back to his conversation with his old friends. I didn't care about that look. I didn't care what he thought anymore, although deep inside, there was still a lingering wound from his words in the past, words I had always struggled to overcome. But today I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I had what I wanted, and I knew I was on the right path. I walked up to him. Still, no one else seemed to notice except for my father. He looked at me with suspicion, his eyes briefly scanning me before returning to his story. I stood there, saying nothing, just looking at him. After a long moment he stopped, sensing something was different. He turned back to look at me. "Son," he said, his voice slow and calculating. "Are you okay? Is your laptop still working fine?" Each of his questions felt like an invisible blow, deliberately minimizing everything I had achieved. His words always carried a hint of disdain, as if he didn't believe in what I was doing. I didn't respond immediately. I looked at him for a moment, then spoke calmly but firmly. "I'm fine, Dad. My company is doing very well. His gaze shifted, but there was still something in it that couldn't be hidden. Perhaps surprise or maybe a hint of doubt. But I no longer needed his approval. I had done it, and that was what mattered. He remained silent for a moment, looking at me with a pensive expression. It seemed like he was thinking about what I had just said, but no answer escaped his lips. His eyes dropped to the ground, as if he couldn't face the truth that his son had actually accomplished something he never believed was possible. "Well, then," he finally said, before turning away and returning to his conversation with others. I stood there, feeling no regret. I didn't need his praise. I had done everything I needed to do. Later in the evening, as the party started to wind down, I stood at the corner of the garden, looking out at the vast space ahead. The garden lights illuminated the trees and flowers, reflecting the beauty of a world I had left behind. My father was still there, chatting with his old friends, talking about his work and the small successes he had. But I knew, deep down, I had achieved something he couldn't even imagine. I couldn't go back to the path he had set for me. It was not my path. And despite the wounds that hadn't healed, I understood that I had overcome it all. I had done things that no one thought I could do. That night, as the light faded, I knew I had attained what I truly wanted: freedom. Freedom not only from the success I had achieved, but freedom in standing firm on the path I had chosen. The next day, I left Charleston without saying goodbye to my father. I knew no matter what I said, he wouldn't understand, and I no longer cared to explain. I had found my own path, and it was one that had no room for regrets or complaints from the past. The flight from Charleston to New York felt like a journey of rebirth. As the plane passed through thick clouds, I felt like I was leaving everything behind, not just a small town, but also the old expectations my father had placed on me. New York, with all its hustle and bustle, seemed like the place where I would begin a new chapter in my life. A place where there would be no judgment from family, no prying eyes from those around me. Here, I would live and work the way I wanted. When I arrived in New York, the first chill of the season reminded me of the unease I felt when I first set foot here a few years ago. But this time, everything was different. I was no longer a dreamer with unrealistic aspirations. I was someone who had gone through failures, who had sweated and shed tears, and had proven to myself that I could succeed without relying on anyone else. The first days in New York were hectic. I worked tirelessly with my team, looking for new opportunities, perfecting the tech products I had created. Blackwater Capital had placed their trust in me, and I couldn't afford to disappoint them. Meetings with executives, discussions about new tech projects, everything was happening in rapid succession. Despite the busy schedule, I didn't feel tired. On the contrary, I felt like I was truly living each moment of my life. One day, while reviewing new contracts, I received an unexpected call from Evan, the only cousin in my family who had always believed in me. "Josh, you won't believe it. You've really done it. I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal. Everyone knows about you now." My eyes lit up. My story had been shared widely, and this was when I truly felt the influence I had built. The article not only mentioned me as a young dropout but also spoke of the achievements I had made, from the tough times to signing a deal with Blackwater Capital. But I knew the article was just surface-level recognition. Behind these successes were countless hours of hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices that few could truly understand. As I sat in my office in New York, looking out at the vast city below, I knew I had entered a completely new world. This world no longer settled for small things. It demanded that I continuously strive, learn, and create. And that's exactly what I wanted. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. What I had been through was just the first step in a long journey ahead. And I would keep moving forward, not only to prove myself to my father, but also to prove to myself that I could make a difference in this world. The next day, as I walked out of the Blackwater Capital building, I no longer felt fear or doubt. I had done my job, and now it was time to continue building a new future. A future that I could be proud of for what I had accomplished. I didn't need the Ferrari to prove anything. I didn't need approval from my father or anyone else. The only thing I needed was the freedom to live the way I wanted, the freedom to do what I believe in. And now I had it. Life in New York can be very busy, but for me it's a freedom that is immeasurable. Every morning when I wake up, I don't have to face any supervision or expectations from anyone. Instead, there's a world unfolding before me where I can make my own decisions. For me, this is the beginning of a new chapter, one where I am no longer bound by the limits of the past. My company has started to grow rapidly, and what I'm doing is no longer just about technology. I'm building something bigger, something stronger, something that could change an entire industry. Every day, my team and I work tirelessly, finding new ways to optimize algorithms and develop software that not only helps investors, but also opens up opportunities for ordinary people to access what was once only a dream. But amidst all the busyness, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. Even though I had everything I wanted in terms of finance, career, and recognition, there was still a void in my heart that I couldn't fill. It was the absence of my father, someone I once respected deeply, but also someone who made me feel like I was never good enough. No matter how much success I achieved, my father remained an integral part of my life, even if it was just through his sarcastic words, his skeptical looks. He always saw me as a son incapable of overcoming the challenges he had set for me. The things he said about me in the past, the comments that made me feel like I had nothing to be proud of, still lingered in my mind. And then one day, while sitting in my office, looking out over the bustling city of New York, I received an unexpected call from my mother. She normally only called when there was something important, but this time, her voice sounded different. I couldn't tell if it was worry or happiness, but I could sense the urgency in her tone. "Josh, are you okay? I just got a call from your father. He said he's very proud of you." It's the first time he's ever said that. My mother's words hit me like a shock, but also like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I didn't know how to respond. The things he had said to me before, the things that made me feel worthless, as if I was never enough, had now turned into something completely different. I didn't need him to change his view of me, but maybe I had grown enough to understand that this recognition no longer mattered as much as it once did. What mattered was that I had overcome all the limits he had placed on me, and I had proven my worth to myself. I sat in silence for a long while, thinking about what my mother had just said. A part of me wanted to call my father right away to thank him, to tell him that I had done it. But another part of me felt uneasy. I didn't know if this conversation truly marked the end of the wounds in my heart. "I don't need his praise, Mom," I replied, my voice slightly unfamiliar, as if I was trying to convince myself. "I'm on the right path. I don't need anyone's approval anymore." But deep inside, I knew I didn't completely believe what I had just said. Perhaps I no longer needed my father's recognition like before, but I couldn't deny that his words still affected me a great deal. A week after the call from my mom, I decided to do something I had always avoided: visit Charleston. Not to see my father, but to face what was left inside me, the memories and emotions that had been suppressed for so many years. Although I had achieved success, there was still something that felt incomplete. And I knew, in order to keep moving forward, I needed to finish the unfinished business from my past. This trip back home wasn't easy, but it wasn't something I worried about too much either. I was prepared. I knew I wasn't going there to seek approval from my father anymore, but to face my own emotions. When I walked into the house, the quietness was almost eerie. The smell of the old house, the familiar objects, all brought back memories of my childhood. My father, still the man I once admired, stood there in his worn-out shirt, working in the garden. There was no surprise when he saw me, but I knew to him I was still the rebellious son. I walked up to him. A few seconds of silence passed, and he continued tending to the plants without looking at me. This scene, both strange and familiar, made me feel like I was standing between two worlds. Finally, he looked up at me. His gaze was no longer filled with harshness, but there was still something missing, a warmth I had always longed for. "You're here, huh?" my father asked, his voice no longer sharp, but softer. "Sit down." I sat down next to him. A quiet pause filled the air, the garden peaceful. I didn't know what to say, but I knew this was the moment I had to open up. After all these years, I finally understood that my father had loved me in his own way, even if that love had often been overshadowed by his harsh words. I'm proud of you, Josh. Although I don't fully understand what you do, I can see how far you've come. I can't stop seeing you as a kid, but I also can't deny your maturity. Those words weren't an absolute acknowledgement, but I could feel a change in his eyes. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was an important step in our relationship. And in that moment, I understood that, even though my father would never fully understand what I did, I had learned to love and accept him just as he had loved me in his own way.